Namaste. Welcome to this session. Myself, Dr. G. Uma. Today's topic is affirmative action. This topic is part of the course MGS 001. I have already, if you look at the course MGS 001, it all starts with the concepts. After discussing with the concepts, we have given certain processes. Now, let us see the affirmative action. This topic is in the block 3 unit 11. In this session, first we talk about how the affirmative action, the process of affirmative action, the concept of affirmative action, how it has emerged at the international level. So I will describe the meaning and importance of affirmative action and explain the affirmative action policies. And lastly, at the end of the session, I will explain certain affirmative action policies taken by the Government of India. The International Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination, that is the SIDA Convention, it stipulates in that Article 2.1 that affirmative action program may be required for countries that have ratified convention in order to rectify systematic discrimination. So basically we need to understand that we need affirmative action to address the systematic discrimination. So the concept of affirmative actions, how it needs to be implemented, that is the process, and significance of formulating policies as well as significance of bringing laws to address the existing systematic discrimination as elaborately discussed in the SIDA conference. Next one is that when you talk about affirmative action, it is important to talk about the human rights also. So the United Nations Human Rights Committee states that the principle of equality sometimes requires state parties to take an affirmative action in order to diminish or to eliminate conditions which cause or help to perpetuate discrimination prohibited by the covenant. This is the second point we need to understand that. That is the Human Rights, United Nations Human Rights Committee at the international level clearly states that the state has to take certain actions to address any discrimination, specifically through various structures, or there may be discriminations prohibited by the covenant. That discrimination needs to be addressed. How can the state can address? By formulating certain laws and formulating policies and programs. With this introduction, this unit as well as this session clearly describe the meaning and importance of affirmative action and explain the affirmative action policies taken by the government, as well as we discuss this session we will discuss the role of civil society organizations in framing and implementing affirmative action and the policies related to affirmative action. First of all, as a learner, you must understand that affirmative action is not a right that is equally available to everyone. Everybody cannot claim the affirmative action, they need it. It's a special provisions only for the people who have been the victims of institutionalized inequality. So specifically the state will formulate certain policies and laws to address who are all the victims, to address them, to uplift those people. The state will formulate policies, laws to address and uplift those people. So affirmative action is not a right. It is not available equally to everyone in the society. Second one is that if you look at as far as Government of India is concerned, our framers of constitution has consciously took an effort to address the pitiable conditions of the women. They found that it is not possible to address their conditions by prohibiting discrimination on the ground of sex. So our framers of constitutions, they felt that special protection should be given simultaneously to the women. That is the first rationale for providing the affirmative action that we need to understand. The second one is that if you look at the Article 15, I quote, "Nothing in Article 15 clause shall prevent the state from making any special provision for women and children." I unquote. This clearly says that state can make necessary laws to address or make special provisions for women and children. The second clause, as far as our constitution is concerned, it is empower the state to make laws in favor of women. On the strength of the Article 15(3), there are number of statutory provisions in favor of women which were challenged as a violative of Article 14 have been upheld by the court. So it's clearly, court also clearly stated that the state could able to make special provisions for women and children. These special provisions include exempting women from punishment of adultery, provisions giving special rights to women in respect of bail, provisions authorizing services of summons on men only. Next one is the provisions for maintenance of women only and provisions for reservation of seats for women in local bodies and educational institutions. If you look at these provisions and all, most of the provisions the government of India could able to make necessary laws, and they could able to make policies, programs to address the existing discrimination based on the sex. The framers of our constitutions, they have also recognized the existing disparities in economic conditions between men and women, and based on the existing laws, they have advanced two justifications, and they want to clearly state and give those justification. Firstly, that the discrimination were not based solely on sex, but also, like if you look at that, the women, not only they get discriminated based on their sexual identity, but such as because of their sexual identity, they occupy a weaker sections, they occupy a position as a weaker sections in the society. Second thing, that if the women, if they live in a rural areas or if they born in a marginalized sections, they were doubly or triply discriminated. For example, if the women with disabled conditions, they suffered in a different manner. So the framers of constitutions have recognized the disparities in economic conditions and between men and women. They also recognize that not only economic conditions and not only based on the sexual identity, the women have discriminated based on other various factors like their locations, their class factors, as well as they specifically in India based on the which caste they born. So these are the various factors. Even if they locate in the urban areas, even if they don't live in the center of the urban, for example, if they live in the marginalized areas, they may discriminated in urban setup also. So Constitution of India under Article 38(1), 39, 42 lays down the guidelines for legislations through directive principles for providing socio-economic justice to the women. That's why our framers of constitutions has clearly recognized various discrimination faced by the women. So this affirmative action, we must understand that it is not a right equally available for the everyone in the society. It's a special need only for the people who have been victims of institutionalized inequality. Along with the affirmative actions, we must know what is inclusive policy and gender mainstreaming. When we talk about inclusive policy and gender mainstreaming, certainly we need to talk about the 4th Conference on Women that was convened in Beijing in 1995. In that conference, Delegates agreed to denote the UN bodies that have played a catalytic role and expert role in developing standards, especially with respect to women. They also sought to engage all other programs of the UN in examining gender-related aspects of their ongoing work. When we talk about the gender mainstreaming and inclusive policy, specifically if you talk about gender mainstreaming, it is a process. This process involves starting from like whatever the policies we implement, what type of impact it creates on male and female. So we need to assess the process and assess the process of implementing any law, policies, programs, any planned actions taken by the government that needs to be analyzed, assessed, and what type of impact it creates on male and female, which includes legislation, policies, programs in all areas and all levels, from national level, subnational level, state level, as well as even at the local level. Even like lowest administrative unit is Gram Panchayat. There also most of the government programs, policies, programs are implemented at the Gram Panchayat level. So every level we need to assess whatever the policies we implement, what type of impact it creates on male and female. That is the first thing. This gender mainstreaming definition links with other gender issues like violence, healthcare, or political participation, and also it emphasizes that when you talk about gender, it is not about women. It's about the both men and women, and the way how the male get affected and the way how female get affected. That is called the gender mainstreaming. So I hope you have able to understand what is gender mainstreaming, that I have explained. This concept of gender mainstreaming, it discussed and emerged in the Beijing conference in 1995, organized by the United Nations, as well as the UN human rights staff explained in December 1919 that gender mainstreaming is the process of creating awareness of the status of women in the society. So we need to create an awareness how the women's status in the society. For example, I can give you an example of agriculture. When you talk about the agriculture, how to mainstream the agricultural sector? First thing is that we need to collect the data with related to agricultural sector. First question I can raise, first thing is that whether the women are considered or recognized as a farmer. Okay, so for that we need to collect the data. So how many women farmers or how many male farmers? If you take the agriculture sector, what type of activities carried out by the male members and what type of activities carried out by the male members? The existing studies clearly point out that 60 to 65% of the activities in the agricultural sector is carried out by the female. But most of the time, we never recognized female as a farmer. If we don't recognize the female, they may not be able to access institutionalized support to do agricultural activities. Like that, if you take a educational sector, what happened is that in that educational sector, the existing socialization process may prevent female to aspire for higher studies. The society may force the female to complete their studies or leave the studies after schooling, and they may force to get into marital or any other activities, like they may ask to take care of their younger siblings, or they may ask to do certain kinds of subsistence activities. Sometimes even the female, they have to leave the school education to do certain kinds of subsistence activities to support the food security of the entire family members. These kind of discrimination, that's why we when we talk about the educational sector, from enrollment, retention, as well as gross enrollment ratio, net enrollment ratio, we need to collect gender segregated data. When we talk about gender segregated data, we have to collect at the every level, from primary to higher educations. When we talk about higher education or higher secondary level, the data we should collect the data related to how many children they are really pursuing science stream and how many children they are pursuing in a social science stream. Most of the time, the female are not encouraged. They were not encouraged to pursue the science stream. They may ask to do the social science stream because due to various reasons. That is so every level we need to collect the data. Like education, health sector also we need to collect data. Like this, it is gender mainstreaming is a process to create awareness of the status of women in the society. How will you create the awareness? First, you need to understand that how gender operates in the society, the reasons for existing discrimination, and to address the discriminations through various laws, policies and programs, one must collect the gender segregated data. That data needs to be presented with the theoretical understanding. Based on the existing data, government may formulate certain policies and programs and laws to address the existing discrimination. Thus, the gender mainstreaming is a process. Like for example, I have explained about the agriculture, health, as well as education sector. Same like when we talk about the human rights, we must create an awareness that gender is a dimension to every occurrence of human rights violation, that we need to talk about it. Like that, mainstreaming also requires increasing equal participation of women in the human rights mechanism, and to ensure that mainstreaming has an enduring effect on the way human rights work is carried out, revolving core bureaucratic problems of coordination and cooperation among the many parts of the United Nations system. Here, we need to understand that the human rights violation not only happens at the international level, national level also. Most of the human rights violation may happen based on the sexual identity, that we need to understand that. So when we talk about these kind of violations and discriminations based on the sex and based on the other factors, it is important to incorporate gender perspective in the work of the every organizations, every government. That is the fundamental process of mainstreaming gender. Like for example, how will they incorporate gender perspective in the government sector? First of all, we need to increase the women's participation in every organization and institutions. When we talk about women's participation and increasing women's percentage, means certainly it will reflect the women's perspective at the every level. Second one is that when we talk about gender mainstreaming, it is about acknowledging that how gender roles and gender relationship shapes women's and men's access to rights, resources and opportunities within and between cultures at different stages of their life cycles. For example, different stages, gender roles. When we talk about gender roles, already we have explained in the block 1 itself what is gender roles and gender relations also. When a child born, the society may expect the child to behave and grow in a certain way based on the existing gender, based on the gender. That's why most of the time the existing resources, opportunities within and between cultures is utilized by the different genders and during their entire life cycles. When particular individual For example, resources. As a girl child, she may have a different opportunities to access education unlike male child. Like that, based on when the child grows up, that women may not have an access to higher education or may not have an access to various institutions to grow in her life. This is very important. One must understand that based on the existing identity, gender identity, how the male and female, they could able to access the rights, resources, opportunities within and between cultures at a different stages of their life cycles. It also aims to achieve the advancement of women through correcting disparities in different policy sectors and ensuring their enjoyment of civil, cultural, economic, political and social rights. That we need to understand that. Second one is that first we talk about the we completed what is gender mainstreaming. Now we need to understand what is substantive equality. The Government of India, as a follow-up of the further action and initiatives to implement the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action, enacted National Policy for Women in 2001. In that policy, it clearly talk about there are 16 major heads they want to concentrate to improve the women's status and positions. That include like a policy prescriptions, decision making, mainstreaming gender perspective in the development process, social empowerment of women, political empowerment of women, rights of the girl child, mass media, operational, like they have also clearly stated about that operational strategies, how to implement all these policies and programs and institutional mechanisms, how to institutionalize the mainstreaming issues at various levels, whether it's a legislations, whether it's a parliament or state assemblies or administrative structure, wherever it may be, the Government of India wants to mainstream the gender at every level. Like Panchayat Raj institutions, already in the beginning, the Government of India has provided 33.3% reservations for the women. Now it has been increased to 50%. So most of the women they could able to stood in the elections and they have won, and they proved that they could also able to act as leaders like a male members in the society. Then partnership with voluntary organizations, and institutional cooperation. How the government could able to cooperate with the various institutions to mainstream the gender at various level. So they want to bring the equality and equity and various level. In this national policy on empowerment of women in 2001 clearly talked about that various critical issues which determines the status of women. First of all, in 1990, there was a National Commission for Women Act enacted by the Parliament to safeguard the rights and legal entitlements of women, and they tried to find out their current status. Based on the 1990 Act, the government has identified 3 significant areas where they want to address it. One is the social and legal empowerment, another one is the economic empowerment and political empowerment. Looking at these various empowerment, the government enacted the policies and programs. For example, economic empowerment, how will they do? Initially, government has implemented like programs like self-help groups program. Now, the government has created women entrepreneurship platform. That is the one thing they have created. Second one is that they have created the skill upgradation and Mahila Kaya Yojana, and the government also supporting to improve their training program, and they have also implemented the Mudra scheme, as well as they have implemented the Women Scientist program. These are the few programs I have mentioned that to make the women economically empowered, as well as with regard to legal issues, they have government has addressed. For example, as you know, if you look at the data from there are women, certainly they are facing various kinds of violence in the society. To address that, the government has created one-stop center and universalization of women's helpline. This is implemented by the Ministry of Women and Child Development. Apart from that, it has also implemented the Working Women's Hostel. That Working Women's Hostel, now you know, there is so much of migration from urban to rural to urban areas in search of employment opportunities, and these employment opportunities also available in certain clusters. When they relocate from rural to urban or various areas, it is important for the women to find safe environment to continue their opportunities. This Working Women's Hostel is the one of the significant scheme for creating a safe environment for the women to continue their job in the urban areas. And another important scheme is that Beti Bacho Beti Badao. It's also about regarding the health. You all know, we could able to see that there is a decline of child sex ratio. It is important to increase the child sex ratio, to improve this child sex ratio, as well as empower the women and girls. The government has implemented like that Mahila Shakti Kendras, that is the another important program the government has improved, and Pradhan Mantri Matru Vandana Yojanas. These are the some of the schemes the government could able to implement to address the issues of gender mainstreaming, substantive equality, as well as they could able to address the affirmative actions and to improve the women's status and positions in the society. This is part of the master's program in gender and development studies. If you go through the unit 11, you could able to further understand these concepts and the significance of affirmative action. So one thing again and again I am stressing that affirmative action is not for everybody. Whoever faced systematic discrimination, to uplift those women, these affirmative actions and certain policies are implemented by the government. Thank you so much for listening this session. Again, the next session I could able to take up the another unit and we could able to discuss in the next month.